Awesome. Now we're live. We are so excited to have everybody here with us. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to be talking all about the future of procurement orchestration with dear friend of Focal Point, Dawn, who has joined us from SIG. We're so excited to have her. So we'll go ahead and let everybody trickle in. But as we get started, I have the pleasure of introducing you to our panelists today. So we have Matthew Buckingham joining us from Focal Point, and of course, Anders, our CEO and founder, joining us from Focal Point as well. And like I mentioned, the lovely Dawn, who is joining us from SIG, or Sourcing Industry Group. So we're super, super excited to have you here today. As you guys know, it's right on the tin. Today, we're going to be talking all about procurement orchestration. You've heard it. It's everywhere. It's on our LinkedIn feeds. But more specifically today, because we have so much tenure and wisdom on the panel, we want to talk about what the future of procurement orchestration might look like. And we're going to go through 4 questions. The first being, where are we at now? Just doing an analysis of procurement orchestration and what it means truly. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the blind spots in today's orchestration processes and potentially solutions to see where we can improve and where teams might start to future-proof. We'll talk a little bit about where orchestration is headed, which is what I'm most excited to hear about. And then, of course, we'll talk about how these emerging needs can be addressed, because, of course, we want to set ourselves up for success. So all that being said, we'll go ahead and jump into the first question. If any of you want to do any way of intro or anything else before you start chatting, please feel free. But our first topic is going to be, what is procurement orchestration today?
So Anders, I'd love to tee that up to you, because it is, we have been hearing so much so we talked about intake. That was the big buzzword for 2023. 2024, intake suddenly became procurement orchestration. And it seems like it went from one small part of the process to a ton of the processes being implemented. So I really would love your definition, since you are the founder and CEO, to tell me, what is the difference between intake orchestration and procurement orchestration? And I know our members would love to know the difference as well.
Well, intake is a function of how you get work into procurement, or how you get that work sort of into a funnel, if you will, either through self-service or through help from procurement. And it could be down in various channels, right? Orchestration, funny enough, is something that procurement has been doing for centuries, really, right? It's about getting that thing done that you need to get done, whether that is onboarding a supplier or doing a financial stability assessment or whatever, right? So procurement has always been orchestrating how to get from an idea to a contract, to a PO, to a payment. Now, however, we have tools and solutions that can help us streamline those things and make it more user-friendly, expedient, pulling on third-party data sources, whatever the case may be, to make that process easier and better for users to do in a more hardened and industrial way. And I think, I obviously read a lot of this stuff, right? And I think Gartner, in the procurement hype cycle, put procurement orchestration as still in the going up the broad curve on the hype cycle, meaning we haven't quite reached the plateau yet of unrealistic expectation. I still think we're figuring these things out. And I think, if you ask, 3 providers, you're going to get 3 different answers, because they will always sort of tailor orchestration to what they want it to be, which is what they have developed, right? So I think what I would encourage procurement practitioners to do is to tell providers and consultants alike to say, look, this is what I need to do. This is how these are the things I'm being asked to achieve. How can you help us do that? And not necessarily say, well, I created an intake solution that gets to a PO, that gets to a payment. That's orchestration for us. Life is good, right? That's a very simplistic way of doing it. But I think orchestration really needs to sort of do whatever the hell procurement wants to do and needs to do to get their jobs done.
So are we talking about touching the entire source to pay cycle in small ways, or is it?
Yes.
So how about this? What does Focal Point do with regard to orchestration?
So we kind of look at things a little bit differently, and we'll probably get there as part of this call, right? It is fundamentally, having been in procurement for a number of years, like I kind of look at things like you need a data layer to be able to sort of focus orchestration in on something. So what we do is we consolidate data from the ERP, the CLM, the source to pay system, and normalize it on the axes that you would normally do in procurement, the supplier, category, stakeholder, whatever the case may be. And we use that data to fuel the orchestration. And on top of, so basically we can do an intake and we can use orchestration for that. So if someone says, I want to buy software, we can take them down the software buying path. And you can say, well, how risky is it? All right, if it's risky, then we can add 2 or 3 tasks, whatever the case may be, right? We also do this in procurement projects where you can say, all right, our sourcing process has 7 steps. Here are the things you need to do, and here's how to do them. And then we also speed that up through to say, all right, click here if you want to onboard a supplier, and you start the onboarding process. Click here if you want to do security assessment or information security assessment or legal review, whatever the case may be. So it kind of facilitates that process in the steps that procurement is familiar with, right? So if your organization has a 6-step process, fine, we can create a 6-step process. If you want to do a 2-step process, no problem with that as well. But we also do this off of orchestration, off the procurement the contract metadata. So rather than having the procurement, the contract solution sending out an email saying, hey, your contract's expiring, we can make that actionable to say, hey, Bob, your contract's expiring. Click here if you want to renew, click here if you want to terminate, click here if you want to talk to procurement. And these are all different workflows that are set up on an individual client basis to say, all right, okay, I want to renew for 2 years, and if the pricing stays flat, we can automatically then say, all right, if those 2 conditions are met, and through the RFX engine, then we can automatically publish a PO, for example, right? So we take the human element completely out of it. So we kind of look, we kind of look at things because we have all this data that fuels things. We can actually serve up that data as and when needed, rather than having people go all over Hellsagers looking for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think realistically, Anders hit it right at the beginning there, which is, procurement's been doing this for years. This is why companies set up procurement organizations in the first place, and it's to orchestrate the whole thing around spend. It's not just taking an intake and pushing it through. It's actually also doing everything else that orchestration or that the procurement team does. Coming back to the question, what is procurement orchestration today? At the moment, honestly, in the definitions that are out there, it's whatever that company wants it to be that's selling something. And the majority of those are honestly only looking at intake orchestration. So it's taking something in and it's buying something or some service or something. That's what a lot of companies are defining as orchestration. We take it one step further. About 15 steps further, but let's say 1 step.
So would it be simplistic of me to think of myself as if I am conducting an orchestra, which is the way I think of orchestration, and it's like, all right, now it's time for the contracts to come in, and here is the risk assessment, and now it's time to ring in over here. And is that sort of what the software is designed to do? Is at the right time, bring in the right part of the company into the sourcing process? Or is that too simplistic?
And I think that's what we'll get to slightly later on. But yeah, it is. It's like making sure the right person is playing the right instrument at the right time, maybe in harmony with somebody else playing another instrument as well.
Right.
So it could, it could be the violins playing with the, I don't know, drums at the same time. One could be legal and one could be marketing. But you have different people engaged doing different things. But the conductor, to take your analogy 1 step further, is the procurement person potentially at that point.
But he's also he's reading his music through your software.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The music is composed within the solution. Not that we took it full circle,
I really like this. I was like sitting here thinking I should have made a list of orchestral vocab words before jumping on. So I was ready with the metaphors and I wasn't, but I love that we've taken it there.
Let's just take it 1 step further. So it used to be with the old procurement, it was like orchestral maneuvers in the dark, and now we're bringing it into the light, Dawn. How's that?
Yeah, well, we're also not doing it by calling someone up or sending an email or remembering to flag it on my calendar that this contract's renewing. It's taking so many of the dumb work, the stuff that's boring, repetitive, and stuff that's critical if we forget to do it. It's taking that risk out of the equation. So that's why I'm really excited about the orchestration, because how many calendar reminders do you need about contracts renewing? And, and how many times, you go to renew and the person, your internal business unit owner is on vacation when it comes up for renewal. And had you known this earlier, it would have been automated and talked to them before they go out. So I'm really excited by it and what it could mean. And just not to have to walk around and look up policies and books. And I mean, you remember, Anders, back in your procurement days. I mean, our company policies could be that big, and that's that big. I mean, they were huge. And you literally would go find the binders on the shelf or the books, and you'd start flagging through them to see which policies you needed to apply. And I'm dating myself, obviously.
I love it. I love hearing more. I love when I get a detail about Anders and Dawn procurement days. It really does add to the full picture. I love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that we started off with a great question. We really set the stage. So let's move on from here to topic 2. Talking about all that, seeing that we're on that upward trend, and as Gartner recognizes in the hype cycle. As this expands, where do we see blind spots popping up in today's orchestration processes as we've identified them here, or as we see them, existing as things are playing out in procurement real time, day to day?
So I think when we think about orchestration, I think folks typically think about a transaction, right? So I need to buy something. And I think that's because that's what most people think about when they think about procurement. And the way I kind of look at it is we also need to use this as we're managing our suppliers, as we're managing third-party risk, as we're managing category strategies and so on. And I think that tends to be the blind spot, is that, there are a lot of good companies out there with good tech, but they're so focused on the tactical procurement part at the loss of everything else. And I think maybe that's because that's flavor of the month as intake turned into intake to procure, right? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And I think that's kind of how competitors have come into the space as well. So I think the blind spots for us is that we need to sort of apply this orchestration analogy to the other parts of procurement that are just as important as transaction processing.
So I'm using this as a primer for me to learn about this. So I'm going to keep asking questions about this. Is your platform built for procurement, or was it built for orchestration? And then you said, oh, this will work well in procurement.
It was, I mean, look, as you know, I spent a few days in procurement in my time, right? And the idea was really that I would spend millions of dollars a year on procurement technology, but the strategic stuff we did was happening off system, manually, poorly, and done in Excel for the most part, right? And the genesis of the solution was really to bring everything into one pane of glass so you can look at everything in one spot, whether that is supplier details or project details, or what projects is a person working on, how much money are they saving, whatever the case may be. And we didn't start off thinking that we were doing orchestration, but that's really what we were doing, to say, look, here's a sourcing process of this complexity. Here are the tasks you need to do. And you sort of you follow the breadcrumb trail along. Now, smarter people than I came along and said, well, that's called orchestration. Let's make a category from that. For me, it was more about, this is how procurement has been doing this for years and years. And let's find a solution that can put everything on system rather than tracking it, like I said, manually, poorly in Excel.
So going back to the conductor, if I point to a chair and the chair is empty, and let's say it's contracts, I don't have a contract management system, I'm using SharePoint. Yep. Does that mean that suddenly the music stops, or is that one of the blind spots that we get in orchestration, where we don't have a system?
So, by hook or by crook, we kind of end up building these kind of pieces, right? So that in the first instance, we sort of said, look, we want to feed off of the source systems and take the metadata and run workflow off of it. But of course, it doesn't take very long for that very same example you just brought up to say, well, we don't have a good contract management solution. And all of a sudden we say, well, I guess we can create a repository for you because we have all the metadata fields. We can store attachments. Like, why not also give you a contract solution as well? Like, we will never compete at least to my knowledge, we will not compete with the good solutions out there. But if you have one that's maybe outdated or one that is, replacing SharePoint, definitely you can use our solution. But there are things that we don't do or will not do. So I think to some extent, yeah, you need some procurement tech out there, but it really depends on what it is you're trying to do.
So do you feed the procurement technology all of my policies and rules and everything that I have as a company? Is that fed in?
Yep.
So that it automatically knows what to apply where?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're both conditionally driven and contextually driven, right? So if we can pick up from your Active Directory or whatever solution you use that you're in Asia, the Asian rules will apply to you, the Asian suppliers, in the most simplistic way. So then that's context driven. So basically, you get to see what the people in that region get to see or do, whatever the case may be. But then also conditionally driven, right? So if the project has this risk, then here are the things you need to do and applies to that. So yeah, all those things can and will be applied.
Awesome. These are really good questions, Dawn.
Well, like I said, I have experts sitting here and I'm going to learn and I'm going to know it really well by the time we're done.
Yeah.
I think, Dawn, it gives you that opportunity, right, to look at best of breed and actually use best of breed as you go along as well. Certain things within procurement, as Anders said, we're not going to replace, and we're not even going to try and replace. We want to orchestrate the whole flow and make it as efficient and effective for our customers as possible. So when you talk about blind spots, yeah, I think it has become a very transactional area. People talk about intake through orchestration being one thing, as we said earlier. But if you need a really top class contract management tool, or your company already has one and uses one elsewhere within the business as well, because sales tend to use some contracts as well, as I know. Then you can use your Ironclad or your Conga or your iCertis or whatever it is to do your authoring and all that kind of thing. Often the lawyers are going to anyway use Word to do their authoring and their redlining, as we all know. That's what they like. So if we can just plug into any and all of those, that's the idea, that we can consolidate all of that data into one place, and then you can orchestrate much, much better the whole flow of that from left to right.
So can I see trends that, like this contract turned out, or these contracts were really, really good and produced great KPIs and great results. And then, so maybe I can learn best practice from looking at my own data. Is that possible?
So the cool thing that we do as part of, our implementation is we look at data that exists already, then we augment it with third-party data sources, as well as scraping data from existing contracts, for example, right? So the AI to read contract clauses and say, this is your limitation of liability and here are the exceptions is sometimes a little tricky, right? But we're still training the algorithms. But what we're trying to do here is really say, all right, here are the contracts you have in a category by supplier, and here are the master agreements with the suppliers that might be inappropriately risky, those kinds of things, right? And I think that's kind of cool, because that is the stuff that procurement and risk experts want to know about without having to read 200 contracts on a need basis, right?
So you brought up AI. Where is AI built into all of this?
So we're a process first company, right? So we basically look at procurement processes, soup to nuts. And then where we think it makes sense and our customer think it makes sense, we add the AI component. So we have the table stake, chat bot intake solution that people want to say, all right, I want to buy a green tent for an event in London. Yeah, fine. We can send you down the right path and collect that data. We also have like I said, a contract metadata scraper where you can upload a contract into a system. It could be our system or a third-party system. And we then take all the metadata fields from the contract without someone having to look for it, right? So you can upload a contract in a matter of seconds rather than to sort of flip through pages to find out, the relevant information. We're also tinkering around with some data scraping from the internet, so we can have onboarding suppliers in a matter of seconds rather than the way it is today, where suppliers basically get presented with data that they need to confirm, rather than having to do all those things manually. So we're trying to speed up the pain points. You're getting that. That's typically the flavor that you need to hear here, is that we're finding what the tedious tasks that people have to do, and we're trying to automate them to the best extent possible.
So
yeah, automate the automatable.
Yeah,
is the idea.
I think the best thing about this for me is that normally when I ask that question, I get a 40,000-foot level of, we're gonna create world peace, and I want to call bullshit on the answer. And I'm not calling bullshit. I think you're being realistic. I think you are being honest, and that is so refreshing when we're talking about what something is, not what we want it to be or where it's going to be in 3 years, but what it is today. I think I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you will see this again and again with us, right? So we are not a solution looking for a problem. We start with the problem first, right? And that kind of shows, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Once again, really, really great questions on this one. So we will keep pushing on to topic 3. So we've kind of started chatting about this, but let's talk a little bit about where we think procurement orchestration is headed. What does the future look like? What are issues that we're seeing now, perhaps, and how might we attack them?
And I would like to frame it that I'd like to see where it's going to be in 2 to 3 years, not blue sky forever. But what is realistic in 2 to 3 years? How far can you guys take it? And do you think what kind of impact do you think we'll have?
So I obviously have an opinion about this, right? So I spent a lot of time talking with analysts, and the things that I'm hearing from the analysts, whether it's Gartner or Spend Matters or CPO Rising, whatever the case may be, right? There are a few themes that come back again and again, right? So I've been told orchestration needs to perform data aggregation, and that means taking data from disparate systems, bringing them together and enrich it as possible, right? The second thing is perform data enrichment. So take the data that you have, use third-party sources to enrich it so it becomes more meaningful. That has workflow that is conditionally driven and contextually driven, so you can do things differently for different organizations. And the last two is provide analysis or an analytics, and then the last thing is provide recommendations, right? And I think that's far away from doing that yet, right? So we're definitely doing that in certain cases today to say, look, you're setting up a project in category X and you're behind in your diversity and inclusion targets there. You may want to consider looking for more diverse suppliers, and here's how you do that. And I think that is the kind of insights that procurement organizations are looking for, without having to go into the category dashboard and say, all right, where am I at the on PO on contract percentages? Where am I at with ESG? Where am I at for DE&I? Like, you should be able to say, like, here are the things you need to think about in this context, right? Pretty cool.
And I think the outcome of that is going to be, you're going to get more spend under management, first of all. So that's the output. So it's going to differentiate companies from other companies. So companies that adopt orchestration in the way that we're doing it early on, they're going to get more spend under management. They're going to have more effective use of their people, definitely. Processes are going to move much more quickly. But what that impact is, especially on you, Dawn, and SIG University, is it's going to change the way that you're training people to do things, as well as things move forward, because people are going to have more data available at the right time, and they're going to become much more effective in doing their job in that way. But what that means is the way that they do their job is going to change as well. So they're not going to be going out and hunting for the data that they used to go and hunt for. Maybe the negotiation side of the business increases, and you start to negotiate more spend, you start to negotiate more contracts in a more effective and efficient way. But I think there's a roll-on effect for everybody within procurement, not just the tech people, not just the buyers, but everybody in procurement effectively.
Yeah, in fact, I just had a LinkedIn argument with somebody about AI in the future and where it's going to help. So I was using AI and doing a SWOT analysis, for example, and in about 3 seconds, I had a decent SWOT analysis. It would take probably a couple more hours to really refine it directly for a company, but it took me 75% of the way there. The person I was arguing with said, no, that's to do a good SWOT analysis, you need 6 weeks. It's like, I don't have 6 weeks to do a SWOT
Not
analysis.
anymore.
And of course,
Not
he's a
anymore.
consultant who sells that kind of consulting. And I said, no. And he said, well, you're never going to get the quality you're going to get out of someone like me in 6 weeks. I said, it's going to get me 75% there in 3 seconds. I can spend a few hours to refine it to 100%. And that's where I think people are haven't realized how far technology has come and what it is capable of doing. And then, I'm going to go back to my mantra: smart people don't want to do dumb work. And if you're going to have smart people in these jobs doing, SWOT analysis for 6 weeks, shoot me in the head. I quit and I'm getting another job.
I agree 100%, Dawn. I think I was actually watching something about this over the weekend, and do not quote me, I could be wrong. I'll follow up with this on LinkedIn, but I'm pretty sure it said that ChatGPT in 2 weeks, out of all of its users, generated more written text than all writings of humans in history. Like, that is the mass of data that GPT alone, just OpenAI, is creating. That's not including Claude. That's not including, Meta, everything else. So I think it's people don't understand why, we might be able to get a SWOT analysis done in a day, because we can't even conceptualize how powerful these tools are. But it's really exciting to be able to talk about how we might harness that power, for day to day.
Yeah, I mean,
I can assure you.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I can assure you, from the other side of the table, if you like, from the sales side, every salesperson is using ChatGPT because it speeds up their ability to get information, negotiate, things like that. Within sales, and I'm talking as a sales guy here, we've been using Salesforce for years. And Salesforce is basically an orchestration tool. It's a bit clunkier than the new stuff, maybe, but it's an orchestration tool for sales. This is kind of leveling the playing field to some extent by giving that information to procurement at the same time.
I will warn you, Matthew, I've gotten a few sales ChatGPTs that applaud me for all the work we're doing in sourcing. And, oh, by the way, I see you're manufacturing a new gun out of Poland. And so they're mixing us up with Sig Sauer and Sig. In the same email,
absolutely.
it's like, I know, I'm not buying your software. You might want to read it before you hit send.
Absolutely.
That might be a better option.
Yeah.
Well,
so I would just like to ask, though, do you think we can, in the next 2 to 3 years, automate 80% of the manual processes through orchestration? Is that?
Well, I think someone still needs to do the work, right? I don't think, for example, an information security assessment. I think we're ways away from having someone trust ChatGPT that their controls are okay and their SOC 2 is okay. So I think the moving pieces of paper around on the board is definitely going to go away, but ultimately someone has to apply human intelligence and get the work done. Right, just like we can't just blindly rely on a third-party site to give us data on another entity, right? It has to come from the entity, right? Or at least be validated. So I think some of the manual work will probably get shortened up significantly, but the human intelligence still has to be applied.
Yeah, so I'm never going to think that it's going to replace 100%, at least not in my lifetime. I definitely think we need the human intervention, the person to look at it and say, does this all make sense? But one thing that we still suck at in procurement is forecasting. Do you think procurement orchestration will give us enough insight that maybe we could start forecasting with a little better accuracy?
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I also think that's kind of where AI and orchestration can work in concert to sort of say, the AI can identify trends and then send a trigger to orchestration and say, hey, we're seeing something going on here. You might want to look at that. And that can kick off work, sort of thing. But I think the data sets that we are using to train are still too small. And I think, companies like Orchestro and some of the other guys in that field are doing a really good job of looking at demand patterns and say you should buy your stuff in September because that's when the prices are low. Like that's kind of cool to me, but it's not quite orchestration. They're sort of saying, here's some insights. You may want to look at that. And the question is, how can you use those two together to come up with really good outcomes?
Sure.
So one of these days I'm going to put together a laundry list of all my pain points and then ask you to solve them.
I love it.
Do it.
Well,
Do it.
that was an interesting one. That's exciting. We are short on time, almost out. But I honestly think that we've done a really good job of kind of touching on question 4 throughout this entire conversation. How can we address those needs? We've been really solutions oriented, which is awesome. But if you guys have anything else that you want to share, please feel free.
No, Dawn, I really appreciate the discussion. We really enjoy being part of the SIG family for quite a few years running now, both as a practitioner and as a sell side person. So we really appreciate the collaboration. And this is a really cool topic. And we're quite passionate about it in the context of helping procurement become better. And we would love to continue our discussion.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me just ask the questions that come to mind, because I thought I've got you captive right here. You can't say no to me.
You have to answer.
When you're
You
live,
have to answer.
so.
Anders, you have to answer.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was super helpful. I really did take notes. So thank you so much, Dawn. Seriously, on behalf of all of us at Focal Point and all of us in the audience today, did want to let you guys know we have Focal Point request intake and orchestration for Coupa coming up August 21st. So feel free to register to save your seat now, and we'll see you guys over on LinkedIn.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.